Well, welcome to the Predictably Unpredictable Tales from the Land of Ardithian. I'm Ardith Goodwin. I created this entire project. I wrote the book and did the paintings. They're all related to the book, but it hasn't been a linear path for me. I used to be a school teacher, and my heart was with the young, but my body broke down, and I ended up having to go on full disability and retire. And that was soul crushing because I lived for teaching. But what that did for me was give me the opportunity to go to the library and check out books on painting watercolor. And as I rehabbed and went through surgeries, it gave me something to do. I had no idea that it would eventually change my life profoundly in the way that it did. You know, one doctor basically said, I risk not walking and being incontinent and all these crazy, wild things. But at the same time, I'm so grateful for the struggle because it brought me to now. And this is the heart and soul of my creative vision that you see before you. It's been building over the last 18 years. I paint much faster than I can write. I trained a lot of teachers in creative writing. I became a National Writing Fellow, but when I had to quit teaching, I kind of cut the cord and let all that go and turned to just creativity and watercolor. And I started dibbling in just whatever I felt like doing. And when the term the Land of Ardithian landed in my world, thanks to my husband who was walking past one of my weird characters, and he's like, "That's so Ardithian." It's like the hair on the back of my neck stood up because it was a divine moment of a phrase that made me understand I really wanted to build a children's book project. The only problem at that time was I was teaching online and I was teaching in the classroom, and I knew that I was spread too thin. But eventually I would create a children's book that would align with the paintings because the characters and the energy is something that I absolutely know exists within the Land of Ardithian. So a year ago, November, I called my business partner, Amy, and I said, you know what, for marketing purposes, I'm going to need to go ahead and write like the first chapter or two, just so I have my head wrapped around this story at large. As soon as I wrote chapter 1, I called her and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to stop writing this. I'm going to have to finish draft 1. And I cut the cord on some revenue streams and took a big financial risk and committed a year to writing and drafting while I painted. And the first book, Penwondertive, is the product of that effort over this past year. I'm totally self-taught as an artist. I did not go to art school. My first degree was in PE K through 12 and then early childhood master's, and my national boards as a middle childhood generalist. But I was always imaginative and creative, and I love color. And so the combination and the recipe of all of that led to me walking through the world creatively with lenses wide open. And I'm so grateful for that. As a contemporary painter, I am fascinated by complex systems and dynamic movement. I was an athlete when I was younger, and when my body broke down, I can no longer, move dynamically. So what that meant was I could process that grief and the joy of that through the way that I paint. I also struggled with having a style. I had been a painter and I piddled for about 10 years, but I knew if I wanted to become a full-time working artist, the industry required me to have a style. And I did not have a mentor and I did not have an academic program. So I went to what I love to do, and I started researching artists that had very distinct styles because I wanted to know what was the recipe that gave them that. And what I quickly found was artists that had a very strong style had a consistency in the colors that they use. They had a consistency in the physical way that they constructed their artwork, and they had a strong point of view. They had a vision for what they were hoping to express and say through paint and pigment. So once I identified those 3 factors, I then realized it can't all be technical. There had to be a heart work in it because that point of view came from a place of having a message. So I kept thinking about what was important to me, and when I was 40 years old, it was the first time in my life I ever asked that question of what was important to me. And I wrote down a couple of things. I believe that energy flows through us and from within us and around us. I'm a person of faith, but I'm also a person of science. I believe that our world is imperfect and we are imperfect, but we are deeply beautiful and valuable. And I have a fascination with complex systems and chaos and attempting to bring order to that. So the physical way that I construct my work, especially my abstractions, there's a lot of complexity and a lot of moving parts to all of them. But then I overlay that fascination to my figurative work. For this project, I actually went a lot more on the realism side than I typically would have done, because I knew that the audience for a children's book would need to relate to characters that they could identify with, as opposed to just bizarre, weird characters. I still have a few of those, like the fish heads in love that you'll see, and Tut Lexicana over here with the hot pink face, the selfie. But I just gave myself permission to be creatively odd in my own way. And I began to understand that the concept of what's your version of beautifully different and interesting was the branding idea for how I knew artwork is important to all of us. Creativity is not a superpower that some of us get and some don't. I believe every single human is creative in their own way, but it's like a muscle in the brain. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. So people would ask me, well, how do you get so creative and prolific? And I'm like, well, I licked Play-Doh as a child. But no, I study and I practice and I move the line all the time. I am a big proponent of using journaling, art journaling, and sketchbooks. And my books are very fluid, but it's those pages is where I problem solve creatively. So when I knew that I was going to write the story and I started visualizing the scenes, my world just kind of blew up in a fantastic way. Because now as I move through the world, I identify things like snow here in Joplin will be written into book 2 in some way, just because I believe life is so incredibly short, and I would rather stay fully open to creative magic in my life than attempting to force an outcome. And that's just one of the ways that I absolutely love to teach. So Penwondertive is book 1 of 5. This is an entire series that I'm doing. And it sets it's kind of like the price of admission, really. The first half of Penwondertive is kind of a hard read because the two protagonists, the children, end up getting kidnapped and held hostage. And there's some really hard parts to the first half of the book. And then the second half is when the fantastical world opens up to the children and they realize that life is not what they thought it was, and that there's this whole dual reality in an imaginary way. And as the rest of the books evolve, the big problem is that the family called the Aetius families, Morphaceous, Splendaceous, Cortaceous, Sordaceous. I love words, juicy words, but they pretty much want to annihilate all the good in the world and they want to build their own. They're physically altering animals in the world in very terrible ways, and they're just not good people. So the journey that the children will take and the journey that the Wooglians will take over the course of the 5 books will be learning how to problem solve and defeat the Aetius tribe. And it's not going to all go smoothly, and there won't be rainbows and unicorns in a lot of it, but at the end of the day, the underlying belief for me is hope matters. So by the end of the series, I hope that readers and viewers walk away with the belief that we can cling to hope if we have nothing else. So the show that you see here is a combination of my fascination with energy, my fascination with the characters, the illustrations that go in the book, and some of the larger paintings are actually illustrations as well. So it's not simply defined to the small ones on the back wall. But I also overlay the abstraction of energy to a lot of the characters, because my belief is that in the Land of Ardithian, energy plays a critical role. The magic system in my book is not dragons and it's not witches. It's all about energy. So the vemispheres, the spheres that you see lit up and over there, in my world, y'all are welcome to come sit up here. There's plenty. Vemispheres are objects that the Ardithians can crush to release the energy, and each energy orb possesses a different power, such as growth, which means an organic or inorganic object would grow or shrink. Spy ball, if you have that one, you can spy on any evil villain. Hope is the pink one, peace and calm, courage. The teeth extractor, if you have that one, the evil villain's teeth is going to fall right out of his face. So there's humor built into the magic system, but at the same time, there's also a lot of really powerful things built into it. And then I remained fascinated in the sense that the only type of energy we can experience and see as human beings is light energy. But there's so many other forms of energy that we experience that impact our bodies and our minds. It's just they're invisible. And I got to thinking about that idea, and I thought, well, if I had a button to create a world where I could have a do-over and I could create my version of what I believe a beautiful world would look like, that would be the Land of Ardithian. And because of that, I have written in the text that the energy is visual. Like you can see ribbons of energy flowing and spheres floating. And as the characters move through that atmosphere and engage with the energy, it alters them either by mood or by shape. So as I was writing the story, it was really a technical challenge. How do I convey the concept of the atmosphere where it makes sense to us as humans in reading the book? And that was a super fun thing for me to try to problem solve and figure out. So some of the paintings that you see are paired next to the abstracted energy, like these two right here. This is Curiobatry energy, and it has to do with the energy that exists in Dulcinea Woods. And there's another one. This is kind of nighttime, and that one's kind of daytime. But then this character right here is Menderton, and he is the main protagonist in the story. And you can see that they have the same structure, the atmosphere. So as he moves through the woods, I would actually write that he encounters floating yellow spheres that float, that spin, that particulate, lots of big words. But each community has a different atmosphere. So all of the abstracts in the room represent either a different community and what they see and engage with, or it is the abstraction of the energy in the Penwondertive books. So the bigger problem, too, with the Aetius family, there's a couple of things that they want to get their hands on in this world. There are 8 books called the Penwondertive books, and it is how the world was made. Each book represents an important part of what world building would be, and that would be everything having to do with beauty, everything having to do with the seas and the oceans, or the sky, everything having to do with the history of Ardithians, everything having to do with the technical structure. So each book represents the best of what I believe in an imaginary way we would need to know the knowledge of. And then in the cover of each book, the orb or the sphere would be engaged. And if you have all 8 books together with their spheres, that gives the user the ability to build a world and create a world. But it also gives the Aetius family the opportunity to destroy the Land of Ardithian and create the Land of Aetius. And so that's how that crazy, wild story is weaved through, because it's kind of a hero's journey, but it's also a found family story. And a lot of the elements in the story mimic my growing up and my husband's growing up, from the geography of where it takes place, because I live in Mobile, Alabama, and we had a home on Dauphin Island, and Hurricane Katrina took the house. Hurricane Ivan took the house. Hurricane Katrina took the physical lot. So we own the longitude and latitude, but that's all that's left there out in the water. So I also wanted to showcase the beauty of the coast, growing up on the Gulf Coast, and all the way from Mobile to Fort Morgan to the lighthouse in Mississippi. Sand Island Lighthouse, I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. That was the inspiration for the cover of the book in the Ardithian Lighthouse. And a lot of the geography that happens within the story is pulled from the places that I have either lived or traveled throughout my life. And that's pretty exciting to me because I think we live in such amazing places, and I want to showcase that as well. This next year, what it's going to look like for me is I have committed to writing the first draft of the rest of the series by the end of the year. Instead of finishing book 2 and getting it published this year, I want the whole series written out. And that's going to be my goal. It's a lofty goal because it's 4 more books. But at the same time, yep, I'm super excited about it. And then these paintings will continue to evolve. Because even with this Vimy-spheres, there's I think 15 maybe on the wall. There's actually 36 total. So I haven't even painted all of them. And then as the books evolve, the characters evolve. There's a lot of transitions behind those that are in the Land of Ardithian have very differently colored skin because the struggle was I did not want to paint them as humans per se. They are human, but I didn't want it to be about race of whites and blacks and Asians. I wanted it to be Ardithians, and Ardithians just turn blue and have polka dots. Very strange things that I think kids might find delightful. A big part of my hope and desire is that for those that read it, they do find the importance of the delight of the now. And in objects of delight, like my necklace here, these are all what I would consider an object of delight. And I've collected these since my childhood. And then imaginatively, I'll take something like this and write it into the story if it has really deep relevance. A lot of times, adult painters have fear and trepidation of being too imaginative or too colorful or too out there. And as a painter and as a teacher, I just completely grasp the concept that life is so incredibly short. And I do not want to spend one moment in fear of the expectations of others in the sense of how I should create. I want to stay true to what I deeply value in my own creativity and put that out into the world and connect with the people that it's meant to. I believe that's the best that we can do, but I'm unapologetic about how weird and quirky all of this world is because it's how my 5-year-old inner child sees the world. As you walk through, I would challenge you all to identify your favorite brushstroke, because what that's going to do is it's going to help you look past the whole and to look up close into the complexity of it all. I love having that conversation about what would your favorite either painting be, but especially for children, what's your favorite brushstroke? Because then you have to really pause and percolate and consider. Yep. So this is the big project. A lot of these characters are emulated from people that I know. So it's a joke now because I'm like, you better be nice to me or I'm going to write you into the book. You'll become an Acius. And then also too, the humanoids are part human, part animal, part mechanical systems. And the Aquarian octophants, like these characters here, and then there's another big Queen Imperatrice. They live in what I call Marty Bay, which would be Mobile Bay. And they pride themselves on taking all of the refuse that washes from the land into the bay, and then they use that with the energy cells to build an amazing underwater city all out of trash. Little Apostoli here riding the red bike, he and his mom built that. And his favorite thing is to look for floating loot. It gets him in big trouble, but he loves doing it. He's a thrifter, I think. Sean?
I hate to interrupt, but I have a question that has been thrown at me this whole week. Which came first, painting or the concept behind the painting?
Both. Some paintings I absolutely create because I've gotten far enough into the text where I know, and I have all of their names coined. But then other times I would just be playing and practicing and creating paintings to study. And if a piece turned out quite relevant or one that I absolutely loved, then I'll alter the text to go along. So Lig Nicholas, in the other room, the Mushlatam, he's a mushroom head. That painting came before I wrote his narrative in the book. But because of the physical way that I painted him, it gave me the details to write into the scene where he became a hero through the fungal systems in the world. So what I do have are all 5 books organized and plotted out, and I know that the characters, but prior to me writing it, I would say 90% of the time the characters came before the words. But once I shifted to actually being really serious about the novel, now I take the name and I know the characteristics, I know what community they're in, I know what purpose they serve in the book, and then I get to just creatively make those. So thank you for the question. Any other questions so far? Mm-hmm.
So you spoke to art journaling?
Yes.
And how does that art journaling then transcribe into
what you see? So the way that I use my art journal is it's my practice pages. I creatively problem solve structure, color, idea. I teach online the concept of journal. It's called a journal of interesting. And I have journals of interesting having to do with flowers, having to do with insects, having to do with people, having to do with places. And instead of kind of problem solving on the canvas, I do all my ideation in the pages of my art journal. And then once I've spent enough time and I've gained clarity around what I'm really after, then I go to the canvas and I build it there. So without my journal practice, I would probably blow through hundreds of canvases because I would be problem solving as I go. But the use of the art journal gives me a creative container or the physical space to try things out unapologetically, and because I'm the audience for that, and it just works really well. I know Lori has taken some of my classes, so she's quite adept at understanding what the journal impact is. But even as I teach adult painters, I challenge them to use some type of sketchbook practice or journaling practice so that they detach the expectation of having to get the painting exactly right every single time. Because it's like an epidemic. Painters feel like, well, if you begin a painting, you've got to bring it from start to finish, and it's got to be the Mona Lisa, and you're ready to put it out on socials to be seen. And creatively, that does not serve you really well. It cuts the confidence out from under, and then you end up overworking the idea, and sometimes you lose it. So the journal itself is where the process comes back to serve anybody that utilizes it creatively. And that's why it's so important to my own process. Looking at these, if I had my books in front of me, you would see pages of the energy and the bubbles and the structure. Like Lig Nicholas, there on one of the pages, there's 4 different versions of his posture alone. So that's kind of how I shift things and test things out. Lots of color studies, because I'm a colorist, but I go rogue with color. You know, I know enough rules to bend the rules, but I really don't care about the rules because I'm going to paint in the way that brings me joy, and I'm good with that. But also fundamentals matter, because just the skill set of having a strong fundamental base comes from me practicing in my pages so that I can go stand in front of a canvas and paint really weird, odd things that are believable. And that's important. Because, you know, you can be weird all day long, but I really want the characters to be believable and to connect with you on a visual level because they've got so much story to tell. Any other questions? Raise your hand in here if you love children's fantasy. Yep. And don't feel bad if you don't. Because I've been told in the book industry that I'm a unicorn. And what that means is they're like, we don't know how to category you because you've written a book, so you're an author, but you've painted all these things. And it's simply me deciding what I wanted to do creatively based on my skill set of being a contemporary art painter, but also my love of story and imagination. And then the world is heavy. Like, oh my gosh, right? This is my Prozac. This is good medicine to me, because part of me going through all of the medical journeys that I did, I suffered with depression, I suffered with alcoholism at one point. Life was heavy, and it's still heavy. But what I have found is, by creating this world, especially for the Gen X group, I'm going to age myself, there's hope weaved in to all of these paintings. So my desire, I keep hitting my microphone, that's just, my desire is that everyone that is exposed to the show gets a sense of how beautifully amazing our world is and full of wonder despite the hard. It's kind of like a little release or respite that you can walk into instead of walking into TikTok and all those kinds of things. But I also will say too, TikTok, some of y'all probably are not on there, but there have been times when I'm on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok where I come across somebody talking about something or showing something, and it will inspire a detail that I'll go incorporate into a painting just because I think it's really cool. The study of quantum physics right now, I'm completely mind blown by it. The study of AI and how wrecked that all is, fascinated by it. So the science part of me, just as a human being, remains one where I want to be open to understanding and acknowledge what I don't understand. But then I want to turn around and process that through the physical way that I paint, by asking this big question: what would that look like visually? And that question is one of the biggest questions that I'll offer my adult painters, because if your desire and your goal is to paint in a way that is significant or impactful, you've got to find a way to become interesting, not simply by what you paint, but how you share about your journey and your process, and then the end product. It has to stand out differently. So, yeah, and out of 8 billion people in the world, there's only one of me and there's only one of you. And if you let that sink in a minute, it's kind of a profound thing, because we're told all the time there's not a new creative thought under the sun. We all choose similar subject matter, but how you interpret that similar subject matter, how you interpret that differently, is where your novel comes from. It's how you become more novel. And a lot of times adult painters struggle with that, because either they're heavily technical based of how do I paint? And then when I throw the question at them, well, what's your point of view? What do you really want to say about your subject matter through paint and pigment? And then it nails them, because they're like, well, I have no idea. So it's I challenge folks to consider what would be important to you and how could you process that through the visual way that you construct a painting. I did not learn any of that through an academic program. I simply learned it as my way of processing how to develop my own style, painting in a way that I absolutely love, and being true to my creative, imaginative heart. And there's a big risk in it, because it's not meant for everybody. But I totally acknowledge the fact that there's not another me, just like there's not another you. So we each are sitting on gold mines of authenticity if we learn to trust that. And that's the bigger challenge, learning to trust it.
So when we look at this as a children's fantasy, use the word share it. How do you share? Is there an age that is more receptive to this, or how do you share your work with children?
So that's a great question. The ideal age would be 9 to 10 and up, but then also you could read the book aloud to children younger than that. And like tonight, I hope they bring her. She's 5 years old. She's one of my biggest fans, because her family has read the book out loud to her, and she's all in. She's just fascinated by it. I work with adult art educators too. This past Tuesday, I just worked with 45 art educators in Baldwin County. They visited the show this past October, And then I offer them the ability to have a lesson plan around the energy in the hemispheres. And then they get to take that into the classrooms so the children are engaged that way. And even here at Spiva, how many? It's like 1,700 third graders are going to come through this, and they're going to get to be exposed to it. But the challenge of that is because I'm self-taught and because I'm self-published, I don't have a publishing house marketing for me. I don't have a big team getting the news out about this project. It's all on me. And it's a lofty, hard goal. But what I know about the journey is I'm going to put it out into the world the best that I can. I'm going to share it with passion. And I'm going to trust that whoever's meant to be exposed to it, I'll find them. And I don't know how I can do anything beyond that. And I'm okay with that. I would love that it eventually evolves into having a greater reach. But because I've already put the first book out, I've been told if I can't take this project now to a literary agent because I've self-published. They won't touch it with a 10-foot pole, which is really sad. Unless I were to find one that was willing, or one of you would take this project, if you knew a literary agent, and said, hey, I want you to see this. I can't bring it to them, somebody else could. It's all convoluted. The whole system is kind of stacked against the success of writers and artists as well. But I have found that if I share on socials and I'm true and authentic to my heart and my passion and my quirkiness, it builds and connects with the people that it's meant to. And I have been very fortunate to have a huge following because of that.
I also think you're being very humble. I think you can speak to how successful, how quickly your Kickstarter campaign was.
Yeah, that was mind-blowing. I did Kickstarter because I knew that I would need to physically get this book. The cost of getting a book in color printed, holy cow, unless you ship it to China. But if you ship it to China, you've got to buy 1,000. It's about a 15 to 20,000 investment, and there's 3 to 4 months of getting it. And I really wanted to work with a company in the United States. So I did find a company called 48 Hour Books. But the reality is, because of all the colored images, the cost of these books are so expensive. And then I learned, even on Amazon, if I take this book on Amazon, I have to charge $48 just for the paperback, and I don't get a dime of it. That's what they charge to print a book that big. So I knew going into this project that I would write it, I would paint it, I would build it, but that in order to get the book in people's hands, I would have to have some assistance. So I did Kickstarter. And within a 3-week time frame, I raised about $25,000, which is just wild to think about. And that was investors and people just following along and wanting to support me. And it's been such an amazing ride. My family, too, has been tremendously supportive. Like, my husband has funded the second purchase of the next 100 books. And I just couldn't do it without my tribe. It's just been an incredible journey. But it's also an extraordinarily lot of work. Physically, I do sleep at night. People question that. My body has held up pretty well, but it's now beginning to be harder. And then just the amount of time it takes to build not just the book, but the paintings. If the book didn't even exist, this number of paintings for one person, it's a labor of love. But also doing that in duality of writing the book and getting the book published and doing everything online with my website, because I don't have a team, I don't have employees, it's just me. And it's quite audacious to think that I could do it. But I identified a dream and a vision that I wanted to bring to the world, and I wanted it to be the legacy that I leave this world. And because of that, I was willing to commit and stay devoted to whatever amount of work it would call for me to do to see it come to fruition. And it's a surreal thing to know, 20 years ago, I kind of had this tiny little dream. I'd love to do a children's book. And then here I stand with the physical ability to stand here and not be in a wheelchair, because I was for a while, and just be surrounded by the project at large. It is a testament to the spirit of overcoming. And on a personal note, throughout the years, I struggled with depression so much. And I was working with a psychologist at the time, and he shared his faith through his practice with me because I gave him permission to. But 7 different times over the course of 3 weeks, I had strangers come to me or a message sent to me that said, we are meant for greater things. These people did not know one another. They were never connected. If there ever was divine inspiration, it was those 7 moments in a 3-week period to get my attention to say, we are meant for greater things. And I believe that like I'm breathing in my bones. And it's what encouraged me to stay willing to work so hard, because I believe the message of the Land of Ardithian and the Predictably Unpredictable Tales from that, it's all about life is going to throw you hard balls, curve balls. It's going to be tragically hard at times. But we can still hold on to hope, and we can still embrace imagination, and we can still have courage to do hard things. So those are big musts for me as a human being, and I choose to write them into what happens in the story, because either it be a 5-year-old in an adult's body that gets exposed to this work, or it's going to be children that get exposed to this work. I want them to understand hope matters and courage matters, and that they individually are amazing and beautiful in their novel and in their authenticity. And if I can do that through how I write or how I paint, then I feel like I've done due diligence to the gifts that I was handed. And that's important to me. Any other questions?
Okay, I'm going to ask one.
That's fine.
Hope matters.
It does.
So at the end of all this series, we're going to know that hope matters.
Mm-hmm.
Is it written into the first book, the second book?
So it's written into all of them. The pink sphere is the sphere of hope. All of those spheres have a different name. The pink one is hope, the blue one is peace and calm, the yellow one is courage. And then little Arlen, who is the girl holding that sphere, she's holding the sphere of hope. And that sphere is going to be integral in all of the books, in how it's used in the outcome of what happens when it's destroyed. There's some big things, but yes, so the emotional weight of what the characters will experience and the act of attempting to save the world is all weaved into the meaning behind each of the energies. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
What's on your necklace?
What's on my necklace? My objects of delight. So like this right here, this necklace is written into Penwondertive. It's the necklace that little Arlen chooses at the clothing store. And this is what inspired the detail of that in the book. But all of these tiny little things are memories from my childhood. Like the domino, my dad and his brothers would sit out on the front porch in Sims, Alabama. We lived in the country. They played dominoes every night. And as a child, just watching them play dominoes with their tobacco and spit cups, disgusting. It just left a beautiful impression. So like this it reminds me of that. My son's first tooth is in this. There are gifts that my family has given me. All of these have either been gifted to me or they connect to a memory in my past. And it's just taking a simple necklace like this and giving myself permission to imaginally consider how can this right here become a magic token that I can write into the book. Like little Arlen in the first book, she ends up finding a pink marble on the sidewalk, and she hides it because she knows that the terrible Cretaceous, if he sees it, is going to take it from her. But it becomes this beautiful little marker of hope for her. And then also what happens in the story when, I don't want to give too much away for those who haven't read it, but it comes back around and becomes very important. And it's just, it's a mirror of the sphere, but she finds it as a little marble. She'll find lots of little things throughout all 5 books. But the other characters will too, because they all manipulate the spheres, and it becomes something where the teenagers and the kids in the story go to what's called Vimisphere competitions, and it's a role-playing board game with all of these different colored marbles and spheres, and they learn to tell stories. And what ends up happening is some of those marbles or toys get replaced with real Vimispheres. The children don't know it, and it causes all kind of chaos. But the spheres are going to be super important to how the story evolves, how they seek them out, who uses them, and who loses them. It's kind of wild. Mm-hmm.
The teeth extractor. I haven't read the book,
Mm-hmm.
but it bothers me because the other spheres, for the most part, they're all in the realm of good.
Yes.
The teeth extractor is like using evil for good.
Mm-hmm. And it also is going to be who has that sphere, because if the Aetius family or tribe ends up getting their hands on that, they can use it against the children and vice versa. So there are some really hard spheres I have not painted yet. That's one of them. It's also tied to a little bit of humor, because I really want the book to be uplifting and funny when it can be, as much as it can be. But yeah, there's one called The Stink Bomb, totally disgusting. There's another one that explodes the heart. So there's some hard Vimispheres coming up, but the teeth extractor is just from a kid point of view. If I were to ask an 8-year-old, what superpower could you have to defeat your evil villain? Oh, well, his teeth would fall out. So it's a way to connect back to me being a teacher of 3rd graders, and that's absolutely something they would have thought up. So it's kind of a nod to them and their imagination. It's great.
Within your work, it's not just paint.
Correct.
There's a lot of mixed media, there's a lot of collage.
Yes.
Why?
Because there's a couple of reasons. So the complexity of constructing a painting to me is way more enjoyable when I have different layers and elements mixed in, but it also mimics the experience of life, that things are not always simplistic. They're multi-layered. There's things that show up unexpectedly. And I have a fascination with collage. When I was at my sickest, I spent almost a year in bed. I didn't paint. I didn't write. It was bad. My best friend walks in the door with boxes of magazines and scissors and Ziploc bags, and she said, "You're going to sit in this bed. You're going to at least be creative." And I started cutting pieces out of the magazine. For example, if it had a lamp, I'd cut the vase out. I would cut the lampshade out. And then we would category them in different Ziplocs, because those tall linear pieces could become legs on characters. 1,000 pieces in, maybe. My husband's like moving into the other room for a while because it was too much for him. But what that did for me, I started to fall in love just with the unexpected nature of collage and surrealism. And then I committed to a 4-inch by 4-inch painting every day for 30 minutes. And I had a corner in my son's room because I didn't have a studio at the time. But I had my stuff laid out, and I had piles of different types of collage. I'd set a timer, and I would do a 4-inch by 4-inch. And then when it went off, I would turn around and kind of write a devotional for the day that I needed to hear. I did that for an entire year, and I put these on a blog on Blogger. And then that practice of that made me fall in love with the mixed media aspect in a big way. So now there is no rule that I will give myself to say that I shouldn't do something or I can't do it. I will tear pages out of my art journal and incorporate them. So the head, that painting is a good example. The tallest character with the blue face, that is a rectangular sheet out of my art journal. The face that looks fractured or distorted right in the middle with a lot of realism, that is a painting on canvas. There are packing tape transfer, the character with the red and white stripes all the way to the right at the bottom, and she's got her hands like this. Her face is a packing tape transfer. And it's just, it gives me the ability to do something unexpected or unpredictable. And that's because I'm emulating the belief that life is unpredictable, because that's what it taught me. So the distortion and the unpredictable nature of things is one reason why I love the mixed media aspect so much. And then sometimes if I'm just fighting my realism, I'm going to slap a collage element on it because it's easy and I can. Right? Yeah. And then two, it depends on the ephemera too, because I have taken photographs of my family members. I have taken old love letters. If a piece of paper is relevant to the narrative of the story and the character, then I will help build that into the physical nature of their paintings. This painting right here, A Moment of Courage, his jacket is built with ballpoint pen sketches of different faces and different emotions that his grandfather experienced. But you wouldn't know that, but if you walk up to it, you're going to see lots of faces and eyeballs looking at you. Yep. It's a big project. I'm super proud of it. It was a lofty goal, and I'm 57, and the journey's been wildly unpredictable. But to be able to stand here and see it and acknowledge it, that, yeah, I did that, it's really a remarkable thing, especially when a good number of years I was told that I was not going to be able to do. And I do hope it inspires some folks who may have fear and trepidation around if their work is good enough, or if they're afraid to be seen and put their work out there. I hope that this might inspire them to show it anyway and to share it, because there's nothing more inspiring, in my opinion, to see somebody in their average walk of life turning to creativity and it bringing them joy, and them talking about it online. Like, look what I did today. I cheer it on, because it, like I said, this is my Prozac, but our creativity is a divine gift that we have in how we move through the world, if we will acknowledge it and accept it. And it doesn't mean that the expectation would be you all start painting like this and do mixed media. It simply means start having the lenses of being open to wonder as you walk out your front door, because we're bombarded with so much hard stuff. So creativity and wonder is a way to kind of, it's a salve, in my opinion, that helps. It just helps my mental health and my heart, and children too. So, yep. Well, thank y'all for pulling up a chair with me today. I could talk at length, ad infinitum, around the project and the paintings and the inspiration. But at the end of the day, I really do hope that you love the work and you're inspired by it. But it's not meant for everybody, but who it's meant for, y'all are my people. And if you see a painting that you'd like me to talk you through or share more insight while y'all are here, I'm happy to. Just let me know what that would be.
Well, thank you so much, Ardith. Wasn't she amazing?
You're welcome.
Thank you. And make sure everybody here today and through this evening at the opening reception can sign up for your in-person workshop.
Yes.
That's going to happen.
March 1st and 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I'll be teaching acrylic abstract of how to make your paintings have more energy, dynamic movement. Love it. I can't wait.
So you get the first, it's a limited seating.
Yeah.
So anybody here or this evening gets first shot at it before we put it online. So
Awesome.
wanted to make it a little special. So,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you.
Oh,
for
you're so
sharing
welcome.
Your world with us.
So welcome. I'm so
And
excited.
Thank you, Lori, for introducing her to us and bringing us a beautiful new friend into our world.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's a stellar thing what y'all have put together here.
Well, we're honored
Yes,
to have you.
I appreciate it.
That's it.
All right. Enjoy.